They say computers are infallible until the day they were wrong. The young fire chief spread out the map on the table and said, "This fire is behaving completely illogically. It's like it has a mind of its own." A soft voice came from the back of the room. "Because it does." The old man standing there knew that years of experience, not modern equipment, would save lives. But no one was listening yet. If you enjoy stories about experience triumphing over technology, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss our new videos. The Sierra Creek wildfire started like any other. A lightning strike in the dry California forests at the height of summer. What should have been a manageable blaze quickly became anything but. Within 48 hours, it had grown to cover 50,000 acres, defying every computer prediction and containment strategy. In the command center, Fire Chief Marcus Ray stared at the digital map with growing frustration. Around him, technicians and meteorologists frantically worked their tablets and laptops, trying to make sense of the data streaming in from satellites, drones, and ground sensors. "This makes no sense," Marcus said, pointing at the fire's progression. "It's jumping fire breaks, moving against the wind, and changing direction without any meteorological explanation." Kyle Chen, the department's lead fire behavior analyst, shook his head. "The models can't predict it. We've run every simulation, and none match what we're seeing on the ground." "It's like this fire has a mind of its own," Marcus muttered. "Because it does." The voice came from the back of the room. Heads turned to see an elderly man standing in the doorway, 80 years old, weathered face, leathery hands, and eyes that had seen more fires than everyone else in the room combined. Jake Reynolds, the old fire whisperer of Sierra County. "Mr. Reynolds," Marcus said, surprise evident in his voice, "I didn't expect to see you here." "Heard you were having trouble with this one," Jake replied, walking slowly into the room. He carried a worn leather satchel and moved with the careful gait of someone whose body had endured decades of hard physical work. Kyle leaned toward Marcus. "Who is this guy?" "Jake Reynolds. Used to be the top fire behavior expert in the state back in the 60s and 70s, Marcus whispered. "Been retired for decades, lives in a cabin up in the hills." Jake approached the digital map, studying it with narrowed eyes. Then he reached into his satchel and pulled out a paper map, yellowed with age. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the table. Marcus nodded, and Jake spread his map beside the digital display. The younger firefighters exchanged skeptical glances. "This fire isn't following your computer models because it's not following the rules you understand," Jake said, his finger tracing lines on his paper map. "It's following something older." Kyle couldn't hide his skepticism. "With all due respect, sir, we're using the most advanced fire prediction software in the world. It factors in hundreds of variables." "But not what's beneath the ground," Jake interrupted. "Not what happened here 60 years ago." Marcus frowned. "What do you mean?" Jake's eyes took on a distant look. 1962. I was just starting out as a firefighter. There was a wildfire in these exact mountains. It burned for 3 weeks, took 5 lives. His voice grew quieter. "Including my wife, Sarah." The room fell silent. That fire behaved just like this one, unpredictable, unstoppable, until we discovered why. Jake pulled out an old notebook from his satchel, its pages dog-eared and stained with smoke. "Sierra Creek sits on top of an old gold mining operation. Hundreds of tunnels running under these mountains, many of them uncharted. The mining company covered it up when they closed. Didn't want to pay for proper sealing." He laid the notebook open on the table. Inside were hand-drawn maps of tunnel systems, notes about airflow, and observations written in faded ink. These tunnels create oxygen channels. The fire isn't just burning on the surface. It's following these underground networks, feeding on the oxygen flowing through them. That's why it seems to have a mind of its own. It's being guided by something you can't see on your satellites or sensors. Kyle shook his head. "That's impossible. Our ground-penetrating radar would have detected large tunnel systems." "Not if they collapsed partially," Jake countered. "Not if they're narrow enough. These weren't corporate mines. They were dug by desperate men looking for gold, some no wider than a man's shoulders." "And your evidence for this theory is what exactly?" Kyle pressed, his voice dripping with skepticism. Jake didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened his notebook to a different page and pulled out an old photograph. It showed a much younger Jake standing with a group of firefighters, all covered in soot. Behind them was a burned-out mine entrance. 1962. When we finally got that fire under control, we discovered it had been traveling through these mine shafts. The official report was buried. Too many wealthy families in Sierra Creek had investments in those mines. Too much liability if word got out about unsafe closures. Marcus studied the old maps, his skepticism battling with desperation. Sierra Creek town was directly in the fire's path. 10,000 people would need to evacuate within 24 hours if they couldn't get control of the blaze. Even if you're right, Marcus said, how does this help us? Jake's finger traced a path on his map. We need to cut off the oxygen supply. Strategic counterburns here, here, and here. He pointed to 3 locations. And we need to collapse these main tunnel entrances to stop the airflow. Kyle laughed. You want us to base our entire strategy on some hand-drawn maps from the 1960s? People's lives are at stake. Exactly, Jake said quietly. Just like they were 60 years ago when we lost 5 people because no one would listen. Marcus looked between the old paper map and the modern digital display, showing the fire's inexplicable behavior. His career, his reputation, the safety of an entire town, all hung in the balance. The governor's office is pressuring us for immediate results, said Elena Vasquez, the department's liaison with state officials. If we don't show progress in the next 12 hours, they're taking over command. Marcus made his decision. Mr. Reynolds, I need more than just old maps and memories. Give me something concrete that proves your theory. Jake nodded slowly. Take me to the fire line. I'll show you. Kyle started to protest, but Marcus silenced him with a look. One chance, Marcus said to Jake. That's all I can give you. 30 minutes later, a helicopter carried Marcus and Jake to the eastern edge of the fire line. Against all safety protocols, Jake insisted they land on a ridge overlooking the advancing flames. This is insane, the pilot muttered as Jake stepped out onto the scorched earth. The old man moved slowly across the ridge, occasionally kneeling to touch the ground, feeling the heat, watching the smoke patterns. He closed his eyes several times, seeming to listen to something only he could hear. There, he finally said, pointing to a rock formation about half a mile away. That's one of the main air shafts. We need to seal it. Marcus radioed the coordinates back to base. And you're sure about this? Jake looked him in the eye. As sure as I am that your computers have failed you. But before they could return to the helicopter, a sudden shift in the wind brought a wall of smoke rolling toward them. The pilot yelled for them to hurry, but visibility dropped to near zero within seconds. We need to move, Marcus shouted, grabbing Jake's arm. Not that way, Jake said firmly, pulling back. Listen to me. The fire's changing direction again. Through the thick smoke, Marcus could barely see Jake's face, much less understand how the old man could possibly know which way the fire was moving. But something in Jake's voice, absolute certainty, made him hesitate. This way, Jake said, leading them at a right angle to the path Marcus would have chosen. Stay low. For 15 terrifying minutes, they made their way through the smoke-filled forest. Marcus's training and instincts screamed that they were heading into danger, but Jake moved with complete confidence, occasionally stopping to touch a tree or feel the direction of the heat. When they finally emerged from the smoke, Marcus was stunned to see they had reached a clear area untouched by the fire. The helicopter had been forced to take off without them, but they had a clear line of sight to the valley below. How did you know? Marcus asked, catching his breath. Jake pointed to a barely visible disturbance in the ground about 20 yards away. Old mine ventilation shaft. Creates a specific air current pattern. Fire follows the oxygen away from these spots when the wind is right. As they watched, the fire line below shifted exactly as Jake had predicted, moving away from their position and toward what appeared to be solid rock face. There's another tunnel entrance there, Jake said. Now do you believe me? Back at command, the team was divided. Kyle and the technology experts argued against gambling lives on an old man's hunches. But with the fire accelerating toward Sierra Creek and evacuation already becoming chaotic, Marcus made his decision. "We're going with Jake's plan. Set up counterburns at these coordinates and get demolition teams to these locations to seal the tunnel entrances." Kyle threw up his hands. "This is crazy. We'll be laughingstocks if this fails." "And heroes if it works," Marcus replied. "Sometimes you have to trust human experience over algorithms." For the next 12 hours, firefighters executed Jake's strategy. 3 strategic counterburns were set, creating a pattern that made no sense according to conventional tactics. Demolition teams collapsed old mining entrances that had been forgotten for decades. The work was dangerous and precise. At one location, a team led by firefighter Sofia Rodriguez discovered an old mining cart still on its rails when they breached a hidden entrance. "This tunnel system is enormous," she reported back. "It's like a city under the mountain." As they worked, Jake shared more of his story with Marcus, how he had been newly married when he joined the fire service, how his wife Sarah had been a volunteer coordinator, helping evacuate residents during the 1962 fire, how she had gone back to check on an elderly couple and been trapped when the fire suddenly changed direction, the same mysterious behavior they were seeing now. "I couldn't understand it," Jake said. "I was supposed to be the expert, but the fire outsmarted me. It wasn't until weeks later that we discovered the tunnel system and realized what had happened." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Marcus asked. Jake's expression darkened. "I tried. Filed reports, spoke to supervisors, but the mining company had too much influence. They buried it all, the reports, the findings, everything. Said I was just a grieving husband looking for someone to blame." He looked out at the burning forest. "So I spent the next 60 years studying these mountains, learning every tunnel, every shaft, every secret, telling myself that if it ever happened again, I'd be ready." At first, nothing seemed to change. The fire continued its advance, and Kyle's skepticism grew louder. "We're wasting time and resources on folk wisdom while people's homes are in danger." But at dawn, satellite imagery showed something remarkable. The fire had begun to slow, then stall, then retreat in certain areas, exactly as Jake had predicted. By midday, what had been an uncontrollable inferno was now a manageable blaze. In the command center, the mood shifted from skepticism to astonishment. The computer models, recalibrated with Jake's knowledge of the underground tunnel system, now accurately predicted the fire's behavior. "I don't understand," Kyle admitted, studying the new data. "How did you know?" Jake stood by the window, watching smoke drift against the morning sky. "I spent 60 years listening to these mountains, learning their secrets. Some things can't be measured with instruments. Some things you have to feel." By evening, the Sierra Creek fire was declared contained. The town was saved. 10,000 people would return to their homes instead of to ashes. At the edge of the forest, Marcus found Jake standing alone, looking out over the blackened landscape. "The governor wants to thank you personally," Marcus said. "There's talk of a medal." Jake shook his head. "Don't need recognition. Just needed to make it right." He paused. 60 years ago, I couldn't save this town, couldn't save my Sarah. Today, I did what I should have done back then." "Your knowledge saved thousands of lives," Marcus said. "We need to document it, incorporate it into our models." Jake considered this, then nodded slowly. The old ways and the new, working together, might be good. The story of the Sierra Creek fire and Jake Reynolds' unconventional methods spread quickly. Initial media reports painted it as a colorful human interest story, the old firefighter who outsmarted modern technology. But serious fire scientists began to take notice. A team from the U.S. Geological Survey arrived to map the tunnel system Jake had identified. What they found astonished them. Hundreds of interconnected mine shafts, some dating back to the 1850s gold rush, creating a complex ventilation network that could indeed influence fire behavior in ways their models had never accounted for. Then chicos. This is a paradigm shift in our understanding of wildland fires in historic mining regions, Dr. Amelia Cortez, the lead geologist, stated in her report. We've been modeling fires as essentially two-dimensional phenomena with some topographical variation, but these subsurface networks add a three-dimensional complexity we've never fully accounted for. For Kyle Chen, the experience was humbling but ultimately transformative. He approached Jake as the old man was preparing to return to his cabin in the hills. "I owe you an apology," Kyle said, extending his hand. "I was arrogant, thought technology had all the answers." Jake shook his hand. "Technology is a tool, son, a good one. But tools don't think, people do." "I'd like to learn from you," Kyle said, "if you're willing to teach." 2 weeks later, the Sierra Creek Fire Department established a new training program combining advanced fire modeling technology with traditional knowledge of terrain, history, and the forgotten underground geography of the land. Jake Reynolds, once dismissed as a relic, became its first instructor. His first lesson to young firefighters always began the same way. Computers are tools, not oracles. Technology measures the world, but experience understands it. Learn to listen to what the fire is telling you, because sometimes it really does have a mind of its own. In the years that followed, the Reynolds method was credited with saving countless lives and millions of acres of forest land. Fire departments across the country began incorporating historical mining data and underground mapping into their prediction models. The Sierra Creek Mining Company, still in operation, though now owned by a multinational corporation, initially tried to downplay the significance of the abandoned tunnels. But investigations spurred by the fire revealed decades of negligence and cover-ups. Class action lawsuits followed, resulting in a massive settlement to fund environmental restoration and community safety projects. One of those projects was the Jake and Sarah Reynolds Fire Science Center, built on the edge of Sierra Creek. It became a national hub for integrating traditional knowledge with cutting-edge technology in firefighting. As for Jake, he finally found peace, not in his solitary cabin, but in passing on what 6 decades of listening to the land had taught him. The knowledge that had come at such a high personal cost would now protect future generations. On the first anniversary of the Sierra Creek fire, Jake took Marcus to a small clearing in the hills. There, beneath an old oak tree, was a simple stone marker. "Sarah's memorial," Jake explained. "They never recovered her body, but this is where I feel her presence." Marcus watched as the old man knelt and placed a wildflower on the stone. "You know," Jake said, "for 60 years I blamed myself for not understanding the fire that took her, for not listening closely enough." He stood slowly, his eyes clear and bright. "Now I realize she was teaching me all along, helping me understand so that someday I could save others. Because sometimes the most valuable wisdom isn't found in the newest technology, but in the oldest experiences. And sometimes you have to look beneath the surface to find the truth." If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more tales of forgotten wisdom rediscovered. Leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts on the balance between technology and experience in our modern world.